Oh look, here's a Porsche 911. A cynic would say that it looks like every other 911 ever made, that its engine is in the wrong place. That same cynic would also look lovingly at their preferred hand and steel themselves for another night in, alone. And then people like me will insist that it is a new 911. Well, it's the second generation 991 911, and that it's got new aero, new infotainment, and all other new bits here and there. And just as that cynic is walking away in a huff, we'll drop the bombshell that actually this has a smaller 3-litre engine compared to the old Carrera S, and it's got 2 turbos attached. But it's not a 911 turbo, even though it is, but it isn't. It's the first time in an age that a 911 has had an engine this small, and the very first time a 911 without turbo or GT something on its arse has come with a turbo. Porsche's reason for turbocharging was pretty simple: better emissions, more power, more torque, lower fuel consumption, and all the rest. But for all its advantages, there are some downsides. Turbocharged engines don't rev as high as their naturally aspirated counterparts, and they don't tend to sound as good either. They're a little bit muted by their blowers. And then there are the fanboys, the ones who every time Porsche releases a new 911 with something changed on it, or even a whole new product, will decry the company. They'll say, oh, well, they're losing their way, they're diluting the lineage, they're selling out to consumerism. And I can see why they do it, because sometimes change can have a negative effect. It can take something they love and, well, ruin it. However, even the most minute of changes are criticised and can cause them to drop a company, a product, or even a web-based car show at a moment's notice. So how's about we look at the positives? With a PDK on board, this Carrera S will do the 0-62 run in 3.9 seconds, and its top speed is a shade over 190. Its 3-litre engine produces 414 brake horsepower, 20 more than the old car. It'll also produce 369 pound-feet, 45 more than the old 3.8 could muster. It's supposedly good on fuel too. The S will do something north of 36 miles to the gallon, apparently. Keen-eyed Porsche spotters will see the changes made to this car. The rear deck has been redesigned to cool the car's new heart. There's new aero dotted about the motor, and the 2 centrally mounted exhausts indicate that this car has the sports exhaust package, whereas those with the normal exhaust have one either side of the rear bumper. And with all the changes, you know what? I think this is a really, really pretty car. Inside you can have 2 types of gear lever, one attached to a PDK box, the other a 7-speed manual. There's a new wheel with the option to have many buttons on it, one to shift between driving modes, normal, sport, sport plus and individual, and another to instantly turn the wick up for 20 seconds for a tricky overtake or to show off. But that doesn't matter to the purists. They want something to moan about, like they did when Porsche went water-cooled with a 996, or they changed the steering on the 991 so it was all electrically assisted and what have you. So, is there anything to complain about on this car? Well, its predecessor was absolutely lovely. I had no problem with the steering on it. I think the steering's great. It might not be quite as mega pure as the 911s of old, but to be honest, you have to be a racing driver to tell the difference. It's direct, there's loads of feedback, it feels absolutely fantastic. Now the gearbox, 7-speed manual, sounds weird, but actually it kind of works. And the shift is nice and smooth. The clutch, well, I've never really gotten on with Porsche clutches because they seem a bit long to me. Bite point seems a bit too high, but this one feels different. It feels a little bit more user-friendly. And that leads me on to the handling of this thing, because I won't lie, I haven't been able to test it to the limits on dry roads that I really love, because as much as I love these roads, in this weather they are dicey as sin. This hasn't been the happiest of cars. It's been a bit twitchy and a bit out of its comfort zone. There's been a few moments where the traction controller's had to take over, and if you think I've turned the traction off in this, you'd have to be mental. When I was on the roads coming out here that were nice and dry and didn't try to, drown me and make me swim from a supper, there is loads of grip on offer, but that's not really a surprise for a 911. People have been saying it feels a bit more like a mid-engine car, and yeah, I can agree with that. It hasn't tried to pendulum on me, it hasn't tried to eat me, which I've been quite grateful for. The visibility is great. There's a reason people buy these and use them every day, because it's almost a sensible daily driver. The throttle response, the bit that people want to hear about, well, it's pretty good actually. It does go when you put your foot down, especially in sport, and that gives the gearbox an auto blip and all that. The new engine does give an amazing turn of pace. You wind it up from low revs and all of a sudden the turbos wake up and you're just shot into the distance. And it's not quite as ferocious as you get in, say, the proper turbo, but it is quick. It's properly quick, this thing. I mean, it's got power comparable to the old GTS models, and those weren't slow. Those, I think, were the highlight of the range. It's not quite as awake, not quite as ferocious, not quite as alive as the naturally aspirated engine used to be, but the magic's still there. It still feels good. It goes, man. It goes so fast. It still sounds Porsche-ish. I do love the way this goes. There's just torque everywhere, and it's so exploitable. So, oh yeah, fourth, fine, 2,500 RPM. Oh look, turbos have woken up. Whoa! And off into the distance we go. And you know what's happened here? Yeah, compromises have had to be made, but Porsche's had a hell of a choice to make, because it could try and keep going with naturally aspirated cars, but we've reached the limit of the technology, the eco stuff you can do with that kind of thing. Emissions regs need to be met. And you know what? With a 3.8 litre 6-cylinder engine with no turbo assistance, you just can't do that anymore. And so now they have to look to turbocharging, they have to look at hybridization, they have to try anything to make sure they can still create powerful, fast, noisy, enjoyable sports cars, the cars that made the business. Good God, it's fast. So it's all lovely to drive and very 911-ish, but what about that new engine?
From the outside it sounds like a proper 911, all raughty and angry and 911-ish. In here though, even with the noise button pressed, it sounds a bit muted. There's a hint of that howl, but it's not really there. And then the whole car doesn't really feel as ferocious, as angry as the old naturally aspirated car used to. It feels a little bit calmer, a little bit smoother, definitely, even though it's actually significantly quicker than the car it replaces.
But while its motor doesn't feel quite as perky as before, it's still fantastic fun, especially with that torque. It's so usable.
I think this is still a fantastic motor because the 911 experience, the feel, is still deep within it. And the new turbocharged engine, well, that complements the car's GT-like qualities even more now. It's smoother, it's calmer, and you can still have a bit of fun with it. But I do get that for some people this change might be a little bit too much to take. They might be a bit put off by it, but think of it like this. Yes, change can be scary. Yes, it can be horrible. But the majority of the time, changes are made for the better.